Rudy, I am so excited for today's episode because we are bringing back the gold dives. You had alluded to that in some previous episodes, and today is that very day, the lucky day for all of you GoldCast listeners, because we are doing our first deep dive of the 2021 year, and we are going to do so on the college football playoff national championship between the Ohio State Buckeyes and the Alabama Crimson Tide, baby. Roll Tide. Well,
Right. Uh, we mostly focus on Bay Area sports here. Isn't that what we do?
yes, that is what we do. You know what? Forget what I said. Well, how about we just do a little bit of 49ers, some Warrior talk, some NFL pro football talk. We just leave amateur football for the amateurs at amateur hour.
Let's go.
This is
the GoldCast.
Boom! Welcome to another edition of the GoldCast. We are the voice of the Bay. I'm your host, Rudy Solis III, and with me is my brother, my co-host.
Raymond Solis first, baby. Roll Tide. I'm not doing that shit.
Yeah, we don't really follow college sports in any way, shape, or form unless it has to do with the draft for the Niners. But so here we are. Raymond, it is, even though the offseason has begun for the 49ers, it is still a lot of impact because as we know, we could be potentially facing a very different version of this team, both on the field and in the front office. And we're going to be focused on the front office today. In particular, we're looking at the movement surrounding Robert Saleh and his potential leaving the 49ers as defensive coordinator and then moving in as the head coach of a team. And, of course, our VP of player personnel, Adam Peters, the national scout behind Denver's success when they went on their 2 Super Bowl runs, and then obviously one of our major cogs, one of our big secret weapons inside the front office. They have both been requested for second interviews. Raymond, why don't you let the GoldCast know, though, where is the deal? Who's speaking to them, and what 2 positions are they for? What teams are they with right now?
So, as it relates to Robert Saleh, we know that Robert Saleh has been given a second interview request by the New York Jets. And the New York Jets actually have reached out to quite a few, 8 total candidates. But Robert Saleh seems to be the front runner so far. But we know they've always also reached out to Aaron Glenn, the Saints DB's coach. We know they've reached out to Brandon Staley, the Rams defensive coordinator. They've also reached out to, and this is a surprise, Marvin Lewis, the ASU defensive coordinator, the one coach who could not get past the playoffs in 7 playoff appearances. Poor guy. Poor Cincinnati. Arthur Smith, the Titans offensive coordinator, not bad considering that team really struggles more on defense than anything else. Brian DeBall, the Bills offensive coordinator, who's worked wonders with Josh Allen. That's actually a solid pick right there. Matt Eberflus, the Colts defensive coordinator. They've been one of the top defenses the last couple years. And, of course, our very own Robert Saleh. But Robert Saleh, as you mentioned, has already gotten a second bid to go back out there. He's taking care of that today, I believe. And so that typically means that he has impressed this franchise from the first interview and seems to be like, hey, we want to hear what this guy has to say again because we really like the prospect of this potential marriage. And we'll have to see who else they invite for a second interview, if anybody. If somebody else shows up on the list, that's a good thing for 49er fans. It just means there's a chance that he comes back as a defensive coordinator. And if we don't hear any inklings from like an Adam Schefter or Ian Rappaport, then that could very well mean that, he's on his way out to join the Jets, which to me would be a horrible decision. I think they have done some decent work in the draft category, but I mean, they just got rid of Jamal Adams, who was a 3-time Pro Bowl safety that they drafted. Why they were not able to retain him is beyond me. They have Sam Darnold, who's still, you're still trying to maximize that potential, but you don't have a running back. You don't have a wide receiver. You don't have a good competent line. You don't have a good defense. There's just a lot of holes and work that needs to be done with that team. I just think that the Chargers would be a better fit. Houston would be my ideal fit, but Houston didn't even bother reaching out to Robert Saleh, which tells me that they are thinking more offense get an offensive mind into that locker room versus a defensive mind, even though they struggle on both sides.
Well, they also, I don't know if you know, looks like they did listen to Deshaun Watson and have requested an interview with Bieniemy from the Chiefs as of today. Now, unfortunately, Bieniemy's in that window where he cannot speak to them, but that also kind of affects Niners, because if Bieniemy's going out there to interview them, if they're willing to wait for him, the chances of a possible, already pretty far-fetched, but possible trade to obtain Deshaun Watson, I think pretty much ends with Bieniemy, if Bieniemy were to join the staff. We already here at the GoldCast, I think you and I both agree that already is pretty far-fetched. It's a wonderful pipe dream that we all love to think about on a daily basis as we sit here during the offseason. But in reality, what GM is going to give up Deshaun Watson as at the beginning of his tenure? He'd be out of his mind. Nick Caserio, the current GM over there. Nick Caserio, as we said last week.
He was just hired. He was just hired there. So that would be his first big move after they already traded DeAndre Hopkins and didn't really get much back. They got him for nothing.
And not only that, Deshaun Watson had a statistically better year in the absence of DeAndre Hopkins. Maybe the absence of his security blanket actually put him in a position where he statistically had a better season than he did any season he'd had with DeAndre Hopkins.
Yeah.
So they'd be out of their minds to get rid of him, to trade him to the 49ers. And Bieniemy going out there, if Bieniemy goes out there and interviews and gets a job, it's a wrap. I already think the fact that Bieniemy's even being interviewed, it's a wrap. You could pretty much call it right there.
I think so. I think the fact that with the fact that he's been working with Patrick Mahomes the past few seasons, and Deshaun Watson, in my opinion, is the next best quarterback in the National Football League. That's no slight against Aaron Rodgers or Drew Brees or Tom Brady, but the new guard, as it stands now, in my book, is Mahomes and Deshaun Watson as the number 1 and number 2 punch in the NFL. Both coincidentally play for the AFC. So why not get the guy who has helped groomed the best quarterback in all of football and help him groom the second best quarterback in all of football? You can't go wrong with that marriage, in my opinion. It would be silly not to hire the Chiefs OC.
Yeah, absolutely. So, that just kind of, we went off on a little bit of a tangent there, but let's focus back on Robert Saleh and, of course, Adam Peters and the movement there. Let's finish up your talk there where you were at with that.
Yeah, so Adam Peters, he got requested for a second interview for the Carolina Panthers GM job, and coincidentally, Martin Mayhew, who's one of our executives and works with player personnel along with Adam Peters and John Lynch, and also the former GM of the Carolina Panthers, has been requested for a GM interview with the Washington football team. So we have another cog, not as important, although he has done, I haven't heard any negative things about him since he's been with us. And just having another mind with GM experience helping us evaluate talent is never a bad thing. So the potential of losing him, might be something there too. I don't know if they have aspirations to promote him back to VP, but why do that when he's already been a GM and he has a potential of going back to be a GM? So it's like you can either maybe get a potential promotion as VP with the Niners, or you can go back to the job you truly want, which is a GM over in Washington, which, by the way, made the playoffs, albeit with a losing record. But you have a good coach, you have a good defense. You just need to shore up the offense, and you've got, baby, you got a stew going. But you have to go to the Professional Football Podcast for more information on what's going on with that team. I don't know where else they can get that information from, Rudy. Maybe.
Well, you'd also have to go to the one we mentioned before, which is almost impossible to find via a search engine. It's now just called Football Podcast, and unfortunately, the generalization of the name makes it virtually impossible to look up in a Google search. But they've got 4 subs, and we always like to give them a little shout out. And best of luck to them. Raymond, let's talk about potential candidates to fill these two major positions, in particular our defensive coordinator, Robert Saleh, and of course, our VP of player personnel, Adam Peters. So why don't you start, Raymond, and let us know who you think maybe a couple of possible candidates are for the defensive coordinator position, and then I'm going to go who I think are some possible people to replace Adam Peters in the front office.
Defensive coordinator's tough because I'm not sure. I mean, we've talked about this possibility. We know that Vic Fangio's probably going to get another crack at the Denver head coaching job. He would be pretty ideal. We know that there are some other candidates floating around there, positions. Like, for example, some of the names even mentioned for the Jets head coaching job. Aaron Glenn, the Saints DB coach. I know that James Woods, who was the defensive backs coach for the Niners, is now the defensive coordinator for, I believe, Cleveland. Is Cleveland or Cincinnati? I think Cleveland, who's in the playoff run right now and who has played exceptional, better defense than they did the previous year. So that's a potential candidate. I actually think that Marvin Lewis, despite his shortcomings as a head coach, was an excellent defensive coordinator. He was the one that led the charge with Brian Billick as a defensive coordinator for the Ravens when they were a dominant defense, one of the greatest of all time. So he certainly knows defense and I actually wouldn't mind him in that role. It's the head coaching role that he struggled at, not defensive coordinator. Defensive coordinator, he happens to be an exceptional mind in that position. That would be a pretty good candidate on my end. But I know that you also have some pretty good candidates for the Adam Peters replacement, and I thought they were pretty good. Remind me who those guys were, because I can't remember.
Great. I'm going to start there. Now, it's important also to note that the second interview that Adam Peters has been requested, that the Panthers have requested for Adam Peters, he is not alone. So this isn't a guarantee that Adam Peters is gone. We also have the second interview has been requested for the Buffalo Bills assistant general manager, Joe Schoen. And Cleveland Browns vice president of football operations has a pretty tricky name. Kwesi Adolfo Mensah, I believe is how you say his name. So Adam Peters, it's not a lock that Adam Peters is going to go and we're going to lose him. I think it's important to note that. But if we did lose him, I went through some of the front offices of three very successful teams that I think are worthy of note for the past 5 years. I went with the Chiefs, I went with the Steelers, and I went with the Saints. So Chiefs first. Now, I think it's also important to note, Raymond, kind of like you were talking a little bit before about defensive coordinator, these rules, these positions sometimes aren't one-to-one from one team to the next. So what a position is called in San Francisco may not be what it's called in another team. So I went with scouts that were either listed as the national scout or listed as something lower than what appeared to be the vice president of player personnel, or lower than the vice president of player personnel on these respective teams. So with the Chiefs, I started with the director of college scouting, which is what Adam Peters was in Denver. And the guy we have here is, I believe you say his name is Ryan. I believe is how you pronounce it, or Ryan. I think it's Ryan. Nutt is his name. Okay. Then, or Newt. I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce his name. The assistant director of players personnel, there's two of them. There's Mike Bradaway and Ryan Poles. Okay. Next, we have in the Steelers, we have college scouting coordinator Phil Creedler. And then we have the college scouting the second college scouting coordinator, Ron Hughes. For the Saints, we have the VP assistant general manager for college personnel, Jeff Ireland. And then we have two national scouts I chose, the two top listed national scouts, Mike Baugh and Terry Wooden. So those are all just names to keep an eye on if Adam Peters makes the move. Take a look, think about those names, memorize those names. Those are the guys I'm just thinking of. I would have never thought to grab Martin Mayhew from the Detroit Lions back when they grabbed him from as a former GM to be part of the scouting team. So obviously who the Niners know in that position is going to be way deeper than anyone I know. But those are just names that we should be aware of. Those are just like That's just Rudy's wish list, basically, of guys that I would like and hope would get the interview. There could be people within the 49ers front office that they believe are already deserving of the job. You never know. But either way, I think Adam Peters is could be the toughest person to replace in our front office staff. Robert Saleh is very good, but for some reason I trust them to fulfill that position easier than the scouting position. I don't know. Does that feel right to you as well?
Yeah, I think defensive coordinator. Yeah, I agree with that. And for those of you who are maybe wondering why I didn't mention a few other names, I mean, Gus Bradley signed with the Raiders today, so he's off the list of potential candidates for defensive coordinator for the 49ers. I know Dan Quinn was a possibility because he was the great coordinator for the Seattle Seahawks when they made their run and just has not been able to do anything with Atlanta since their lone Super Bowl run. And he actually signed with the Dallas Cowboys to replace Mike Nolan, former head coach of the 49ers. So those two candidates are off the table, and I thought that either one of them would have been solid picks, and I would have had them on the list, but unfortunately they signed with teams today, so they are officially gone. And Robert Saleh's not officially gone either, but I still think there's a high probability that he gets hired this season, hired by another team this year.
It's important to note that this is very much in play. All right, Raymond, let's move on to our boys, Warriors. Warriors in full swing, our scrappy Warriors team. Let's make the move right now. Boom. Here we go. Warriors talk. We had two big games. We had the second of the back-to-back matchup against the Clippers, and then, of course, the Raptors came into town, which they're always going to be linked, at least during this era, to the 2019 finals loss. So it's always I think a little bit extra juice when the Raptors are in town right now, as it stands in this current era. But Warriors win both games and are above 500 again. The Clippers it was a really competitive game, and then the Warriors just pulled it out again with a lot of help from our bench. Bazemore played really strong. Pascal played really strong. Wiggins with a nice dagger at the end of the game to really kind of help us seal the deal. And just another strong game for the Warriors. It's funny, as you're going through that game, they kept talking about how if Steph gets over 30, the Warriors have yet to lose a game. And you could see him trying to get there, trying to get over 30. It was a great win for the Warriors, a bad loss for the Clippers. And I want to hear your thoughts on this game and then heading into that Raptors game.
You know, for the Clippers game, I thought there was a bigger defensive effort in the second go around. They actually beat them by double digits, which was not the case when the Clippers won the first time around in the first game. So I thought the Warriors really changed, were able to kind of adjust, and they blew them out, in the fourth quarter, 34-18, versus losing the first and second quarter. And they lost the first half of the game in terms of scoring differential, but then third and fourth quarter, the Warriors were able to turn it on, beating them 30-22 in the third, and then, as I mentioned, 34-18 in the fourth. But defensively, they had 13 steals to the Clippers 6 steals. So big difference there on defense. 3-point shooting was 48%. Everyone shot well. Again, the Curry didn't have to do much in this game because the supporting cast played more to their potential, is how I would put it. And when they do that, you can see that they're more than capable of beating playoff contending teams. Have they done a couple of times already this season? I mean, they're 6-4 right now. That's just a surprise. I'm very pleased with the 6-4 record, despite the fact that this team can actually get better. That's the cherry on top, is they can get better than this. Especially with the way that Wiseman has come out the gate. That's been a huge surprise and looks to be potentially one of the big steals of the NBA draft this season. I thought the Warriors were great at the free throw line. They were 15 of 18, about the same, a tick under what the Clippers were able to do at 84%, 11 for 13. So I really liked everything I saw from the Warriors during this Clippers contest. I thought it was a huge turnaround. And the fact that they beat them better than the Clippers beat them, they beat the Clippers better than the Clippers had beat them in the first game, I thought that was very encouraging going forward. Not only offensively, but more importantly defensively, because I feel like that's going to be one of the team's biggest strengths this season.
I completely agree. They've held the last 4 teams to under 110 points, 4 teams in a row. I feel like Wiggins' development right now, he's getting better and better every single game. And I want to turn our attention, Raymond, because as we talked about, we saw that Steph, every time he gets over 30, they win. Every time under 30, they don't, except on Sunday night's game against the Raptors. This game was a truly team effort. Steph had one of his worst shooting nights, definitely his worst shooting night of the season, I believe. I don't believe he's had a worse game than this. I'll tell you right now some of these numbers. Steph was 2 for 16, 1 from 10 behind the arc. He only had a total here of 11 points, but the real tail of the tape for him was in assists, 6 assists and a total of 30 assists from the team, which I know is something you want to talk about as well. This was truly a team effort. And this was the first game of the season that they've won where Curry was under 30. And I just thought it was a huge landmark. And again, we're seeing this team slowly evolve and begin to mesh. And they were all over him. Even though Steph had a bad shooting night, the stats don't really fully reveal everything. Because if you watch that game, they were double and triple teaming him the entire night. They threw a lot of looks at him and they beat him up and down that court. And I just thought overall, this was a great defensive effort by the team and a great team win. Once again, Bazemore, Wiggins, Pascal coming through big, Damian Lee coming through big, and just a really, really great game. Tell me what you thought about this Raptors game.
As you already alluded to, the big stat that stood out to me was the assists. 3-point shooting was not the strength of this game. They shot a dismal, and I mean dismal, 28% from beyond the arc. Just horrible. The Raptors didn't fare any better at 34%, and they're more of a volume 3-point shooting team, but that was 13 out of 46 attempts on our end. So we had the horrible volume and a horrible percentage. But to me, it was ball movement, which is very, very much Warriors basketball. So it's played right into Steve Kerr's typical bread and butter, which is get the ball moving, constant movement around the court, creating shots through movement with your body and also movement with the ball. So I thought that was terrific. Blocks, each team had 10 apiece in this game, so lots of good defensive effort on both sides of the ball here. I thought it was great. And the Warriors actually got blasted in the fourth quarter. They led most of this game. They had a 15, 17-point lead at one point. They had a couple of big leads in this game and really let it fall apart in the fourth. So would love to see them hold on to those leads a little bit better, kind of similar to the way they did against the Kings, where Curry didn't even have to play in the fourth quarter. 33-19 in the fourth quarter, but it was just that 1 point that really made the difference. And then, of course, it was defense that ended this game at the last contested shot by the Raptors to try to win it at the buzzer. So again, I think defense was the big story in this game, in addition to ball movement on the offensive side of things. Even though a majority of those assists came in the first half, I believe 2/3 of those were the first half, but still, the fact that they are getting into that's indicative of Warriors basketball, which is beautiful basketball when it's done right. Probably the best in the NBA, in my opinion. At least when the championship teams were doing it. But this team can certainly get there. We'll just have to see how it goes. But I liked a lot what I saw today that night from the Warriors, and they're 6-4. I'm very happy with that. That's great. I expected them to be like 1-6 at this point, or 1-5. So the fact that they are 6-4 is very encouraging. By the way, the Raptors are 2-7. So beating a team that won the championship no more than 2 years ago, and keeping them, exposing them for their weaknesses and taking advantage of that. That's great. Even though they won by the hair on their chinny chin chin, a win's a win.
A win's a win, but as I mentioned last year, I said if they were not able to go back-to-back, which I predicted they wouldn't all the way back in 2019, I said I hope they enjoy this 1 year, because all they're really going to be is a footnote in the 10-part Golden State Warriors documentary. That's pretty much going to be their legacy after this. So it was a great run. Have fun. This is back to business as usual for the Raptors. All right, Raymond. Now it's time to move on So a little bit of playoff talk here. Playoff eliminator pool that I was in last week. Let's make the move, baby. As our GoldCast Empire knows, I am in a playoff eliminator pool. And last week on this episode, on the video and audio version of this podcast, we decided to go with the Seahawks. Well, I'm not sure what happened, but Saturday morning, I had a weird feeling, Ray, and I said, you know what? I'm going with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and what a great decision that ended up being.
That's right. You made a last-minute change there, and that proved to be a good one. I'm surprised that Seattle gave up a blunder. They're usually a pretty surefire selection to go to at least the divisional.
Well, let's talk about that, Ray. Let's unpack our rivals just for a quick second here. You went through the list of their final games of the season last week, and we're not very impressed. And we kind of felt all year that this team was, a little suspect. But again, I went through last week just for fun, Raymond, and I looked at their entire playoff run of the last 10 years. Outside of the 2 Super Bowl appearances they had back-to-back, the Seahawks have not gotten past the divisional round the entire decade. Of all their other appearances, they've never gotten past it, and they've lost in the wild card, I believe, twice. So this is a team already that really, really struggles once they get into the post. They always look good during the regular season. They're great at scheming against the rest of the NFC West, but do not fare nearly as well once they get into the post. And this was another typical season. All right, Raymond. So here we are, though. We now are moving into the second round of the playoff pool. The Buccaneers, I've chosen them. They're out. So if they make a run from this point forward, I cannot use them anymore. Here are the remaining teams of which I can choose from. In the AFC side, we have the Chiefs and the Browns going head-to-head. We also have the Bills and the Ravens going head-to-head. Next up from there, we have the Packers and the Rams. And then, of course, last, the Saints and the Buccaneers. That has got to be the coolest game. I mean, who doesn't want to see Tom Brady versus Drew Brees in the divisional round of the playoffs this week coming up? That has to be the game. That's the game I'm most excited for. I want to see this matchup. Go Drew Brees. Go Tampa. All right. So anyways, right. I don't really care who wins, to be honest, but I am rooting for Tom Brady. I love Tampa Bay. All right, Raymond. So let's break this down. Let's break this down strategically. I think I don't want to pick the Bills or the Chiefs because I'm pretty sure both these teams are going to be in the AFC Championship. So I want to stay away from the Bills and the Chiefs.
I agree. Those games are a little bit more surefire, although I think the Bills are going to have a tougher time against the Ravens and the Chiefs will against the Browns.
I agree. I totally agree. But I believe that one of those two teams is probably going to the Super Bowl. One of those two teams is going to the Super Bowl, either the Bills or the Chiefs. We've got Saints, Buccaneers, Packers, Rams. Rams won last week behind a really solid defense, even though Aaron Donald didn't play in the fourth quarter. Jared Goff was serviceable enough to get them through and upset the Seahawks. And then, of course, we've got the big matchup between the Saints and the Buccaneers. I also believe that the Saints and the Buccaneers is probably the one you stay away from. I only have one choice, the Saints. That's going to be a pretty tight game. I am really looking at the Packers and the Rams. This is the game that I feel is really where I want to go, and I'm leaning towards the Packers. What are your thoughts on this?
I think it really depends on the health of Aaron Donald. I mean, he didn't practice this week. Cooper Kupp didn't practice this week. So I feel like they're going to be going into this game a little hobbled. We'll have to see how the rest of the injury report works out for these guys. But if they're not 100%, then I'd give the edge to Green Bay. I think Green Bay is a pretty safe bet against this team. They're rested, although the one thing that could happen is the fact that, the Green Bay historically struggles against NFC West teams. So that's something that
or
could
just
backfire,
really,
but
really
out of
strong
all these
defenses.
Yeah. So I'm not sure here.
So let's talk about a little bit about what Vegas is saying here. Let's take a look at Vegas here. So right now, this game will be taking place on Saturday at 1:35 Pacific Standard Time. The spread, Vegas has Green Bay at 6.5 favorites, or -6.5, with a total under of 45.5. The betting public right now is 80-20 in favor of Green Bay. On top of that, let's look at some trends here. Let's look at some betting trends. The Packers, the last time the Rams defeated this team was in 2018. So it's been quite a while since they've played. Green Bay is 5-1 straight up in the last 6 games against the Rams. Okay. The Rams are 6-3 against the spread in their last 9 games. 6-3 is pretty good. That means they're usually hitting that spread pretty solid. The total has hit the under in 4 of the Rams' last 5 games. Green Bay is 4-2 against the spread in their last 6 games. Green Bay is 6-0 straight up in its last 6 games. Here's some stats. The Rams are averaging 23.6 points per game this season. That is tied for 20th in the NFL. The Rams are surrendering 18.6 games per season this season, points per game this season. That's tied for first in the NFL. Green Bay is averaging 31.8 points per game this season. That is first in the NFL. Green Bay is surrendering 23.6 points per game this season. That is 14th in the NFL. This is a basically number 1 defense going against a number 1 offense. Typically, this means the defense usually wins, but in the modern NFL, I no longer believe that to be the case. I'm leaning towards Green Bay, but I think I'm going to make my final decision on Thursday's episode of the GoldCast. It'll give us some time to stew on it. I'm going to look at the numbers, but right now, as it stands, Raymond, I'm leaning towards Green Bay. Okay, so what say you, GoldCast Nation? Who do you think I should bet for in this eliminator pool? Do you think Green Bay is the solid bet? I feel like Chiefs and Bills, you just have to stay away from in the divisional round. I think Bills are going to win. I think the Chiefs are going to win. I think Green Bay is going to win, and I am rooting for the Bucks. It's hard to beat a team 3 times in a row in one season. So I am rooting for the Bucks. I haven't made my decision on who I think is going to win that game, but we will see. And then, of course, I want to hear from the GoldCast Empire. What are your thoughts on the Warriors' current record of 6-4? They're playing tonight, so probably by the time you hear this, their record will have changed. But Ray, so concludes. Anything else to say before we wrap?
No, just a good luck to everybody on Sunday. I could care less when the Niners are not involved, but thus this is a little fun little contest, and so I think it's going to be Chiefs, Bills, and it's going to be Saints and Green Bay in the playoffs, in the NFC and AFC championship games. That's what I think it's going to be. Could be wrong. There was a lot of upsets that happened during Wild Card Weekend that I didn't expect to happen. I didn't expect the Ravens to get past the Titans. And I didn't expect the Browns to thump the Steelers as well as they did. Although I guess they were missing coaches, but Steelers were just too darn banged up and just could not.
And Roethlisberger is
a little too late.
Roethlisberger's done. I think it's a wrap.
He's donezo's, which is sad because I like him. He's always been a fun player to watch. And oh well. Good luck with what's his name? Mason Rudolph? Is that his name? I don't know.
I don't know. And so concludes another edition of the GoldCast. We are the voice of the Bay. I'm your host, Rudy Solis III, and with me is my brother, my co-host,
Raymond Solis the first, baby.
Boom! We'll see you next time. Same GoldCast time, same GoldCast channel.